Welcome, everyone. I'm Don Schreiber, and this is Clearing the Air, a four-part conversation series on pollution here in New Mexico and how it impacts our climate and what it means for all of us as citizens. So we'll be gathering once a month from now on through September as we prepare for a very important rulemaking and regulation established through the Environment Department, and we're going to call the New Mexico Environment Department the NMED, just to keep kind of shorten things up a little bit. And I want to give you a general sense of what we're dealing with here. New Mexico is home to some of the worst methane pollution in the country. In fact, we are home to one of the largest polluting oil companies in the country and home to the methane hotspots that you may remember seeing on the national media, both in the Permian and up here in the San Juan Basin. Hotspots you can see from space. So methane, it never comes out of the ground by itself. It comes along with the VOCs, which are volatile organic compounds, and they are toxic, harmful chemicals that create smog. And smog is something in climate change that impacts our health, our families, and our future. Now, don't worry about getting this all down because we're going to give you this link right now. Methane Matters, nm.org/take action. I'm going to say that throughout the podcast and the webinar if you're going to watch, because we want to make you confident both through education and then your mission to help us make New Mexico cleaner, better, cleaner air for our families and for our future. So thankfully, the NMED has a strong rule proposed for air and gas pollution control from oil and gas. So we only have that because our governor, Governor Lujan Grisham, has really taken the reins in this issue. For the first time in New Mexico, we are assigning responsibility to the oil and gas industry for the pollution that they cause and the harm that it causes our air. And the governor demonstrated that within the first few days of her taking office. She signed Executive Order 003, Climate Change and Energy Waste in New Mexico. As I say, that's historic. That's the first time. But she charged her two secretaries, the Secretary of Energy and the Secretary of the Environment, who we'll be talking about today, with addressing this problem and coming up with recommendations. And frankly, we've been working on that since that executive order was signed in January of 2019. So I want to say just a thing about Jim Kenney, the Secretary of the Environment. Did you all know that Jim was the EPA's representative here in New Mexico up until he was appointed by the governor as our environment secretary? So he has every kind of qualification to be extremely well qualified to address these issues that we're talking about. We're lucky to have Jim. Now that NMED rule, like I say, that we've been working on for months, over a year actually, is that it's a good, strong rule, but it has important areas of improvement that are possible. We've already improved the rule through citizen action and nonprofits like people you'll meet later today we'll talk about have made this rule better already. It's in a proposed state, and the proposed state has improved through citizen activism. So that's why we're talking to you. Let's get this important points improved. We can do that. And then also we're going to need to defend the good rule as it stands now. So in September, the Environmental Improvement Board, which is like a court for the New Mexico Environment Department, they will hold a hearing. And that's where the oil and gas industry will come in and try to remove these protections or to leave things the way they are, not institute new safeguards for our families. And we'll need to both bolster the NMED and their staff and their great rule that they have so far. And then we'll need to be sure that we've got the new improvements and fight for them to protect our families as well. So just remember, that's at methanemattersnm.org/take action. So welcome. To kick off, I want to play a clip from Kavu's Unearthed series, and then we're going to come back and talk to our panelists. Okay.
This farm is a farm I've been tending for 40 some years now. And right now we're in the middle of the hottest and the driest winter I've ever seen here. Unless the weather really changes, unless we get a lot of snow in February and March, we're going to have hell to pay this summer in fire, bark beetles, irrigation water shortage, and drought stress and heat stress generally. It's always a mistake to confuse weather with climate, but these kinds of conditions are exactly what we expect here in the Southwest with climate change. We're looking at a hotter and drier future because of climate change, because of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and because of fossil fuel consumption. No two ways about it. The science is clear.
No two ways about it. The science is clear. You all will, Chili and Dr. Dubois, Natalie, if you'll just think about what Bill Dubois just said, I want to get you introduced and then maybe come back and just talk about that clip for just a second. So let's do this officially. Dr. David Dubois, our state climatologist, is joining us from New Mexico State University, where he works. Good to see you, Dr. Dubois. Thanks for joining us. I've looked forward to meeting you for so long, so welcome. Glad to see you.
Thank you.
Chili Yazzie from Shiprock and the Dene Nation. He's an honored friend and honored leader. Chili and I have a long history together. And then Natalie Eddy, a New Mexico field advocate for the nonprofit Earthworks, a personal hero, a champion of mine in this fight against methane. Natalie and I have got a lot of time in the trenches together. So, David, let's back up to the top here, and I'm just going to ask you to just introduce yourself. We'll save those thoughts about the clip for just a little bit, but can you tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Dave Dubois. I'm the state climatologist for New Mexico, and I'm here in Las Cruces, faculty at New Mexico State University, and I do been here since 2010, and I do work in climate change, air quality, and in using data-driven decisions. I help a lot of folks in agriculture and a lot of other government agencies. And these days, just like the video said, we're in a extended drought, and it's pretty bad out there. I mean, I was just looking at the map today, and it's almost a third of the state is in the worst category of drought, according to the U.S. Drought Monitor. And so, there's a lot of decisions that we need to make. That we've got precious resources out there, water, and now we're going to talk about air. Can't go for a few minutes without air, so we need to really protect that. And that's kind of one of the things I do is. I work in air quality, and I try to help and advise and talk about the sources of air pollution and help advise folks make choices as best as I can.
Thank you, David. Chili, for those of us that don't know you so well, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, again, I'm glad to be here with you all. My name is Chili Yazzie. I'm here in Shiprock, Dene Nation, Navajo Nation. We're in the northwest corner of state of New Mexico. And as I have recently been saying, in the western sector of the infamous New Mexico methane cloud. I've been in public service to my community in the Navajo Nation for 45 years. And my last term of office just ended here in January. So I'm officially retired, and we have a large family farm, and that just keeps me busy. as the proverbial saying goes, from sun up to sundown. Particularly being an in-law, I don't have much choice. And today I provide my credentials as follows, in that I'm a grandpa, I'm a farmer, I'm an earth defender, and I'm a community leader, indigenous community leader. Thank you.
Be tough to top that credential list. Natalie is coming at it from a different direction. And I'm just going to ask you, Nat, are you going to introduce yourself as a mom or a lawyer or an OGI camera operator expert or a donkey wrangler or goat herder? Which is it going to be?
I was going to focus on my New Mexico field advocate thermographer hat today, but all those things are part of what drives me to do this work for sure. Thanks, Don. Yeah, I'm with Earthworks for over 30 years. Earthworks has been working to protect communities' environment and the environment from the harmful impacts of extractive industries. My work is focused on oil and gas. And you know, as a field advocate, I have this incredible honor to connect with communities in both Colorado and New Mexico, in my case, to hear what it's like to live with the impacts of oil and gas, to understand the concerns of these communities, and to do my best to respond to concerns, to see what I can do with the tools I have. It's never going to be enough, but it's something. Bringing the sort of power of seeing is believing, and the use of these cameras, and we'll talk about it later, is really powerful. You know, watching that clip and being reminded, which I certainly don't need the reminder, I don't think any of us do, about the urgency of climate change, and we're living it and we're feeling it with this drought. But when I'm out in the field with these optical gas imaging cameras, and often with someone like Don or other DNA leaders and community frontline members, and we're seeing emissions from oil and gas, methane and volatile organic compounds everywhere we go, every day, all the time. Different types of sites, big and small, new and old, big operators, small operators, you name it. And I'll share some of those examples later. But you know, I hear those reminders of what we're talking about in terms of the urgency. Every study we do, we learn there's actually less time than we thought there was yesterday. And so as we see what's happening with this industry, there's a disconnect of our reality, and that voice we get from the communities to remind us of what it is to live day in and day out on the front lines of oil and gas is why I'm here today, and I'm thankful to be here.
Less time than we had yesterday. I might take away now, but anyone jump in again and let's talk about, if you have any further reaction to what Bill Dubuis said in that film clip. Natalie, I'm just going to go with you, go from the reverse order here. You were just saying why you were here, and that was reflected in that clip a little bit. Can you expand on that just a little?
Just to know that, so when we're talking about oil and gas, we're talking about methane and volatile organic compounds. Methane is 86 times more powerful than CO2 in bringing about climate gas. I don't even like calling it climate change. What we're talking about is a catastrophe, and many of us are living it. I mean, we see it. It's scary to think how young you can still be and see changes in how our climate is behaving. We see it up in Leadville in terms of snowfall and different patterns, and we see, and we also know, based on every study that keeps coming out, just how significant the contribution to climate change is when it comes to the role of oil and gas. And in New Mexico, that's particularly significant. So I'm glad to be here talking about the significant new rule, this draft rule from NMED, and also talking about some ground truthing of what we're seeing in the field, and channeling and bringing some of the frontline community voices, not all of whom are here today with us, but who are a big part of why the NMED rule got to where it is at this point.
Chili, just on that video clip that we did see, one thing that hit me, that here we are in really launching into summer, and that clip was made in the middle of winter, and it was several years ago. And it struck me that even though we're a different season, even though we're several years down the road, those problems that were spoken about in the clip are worse today than they were. I know when we came to the ranch 20 years ago, we were still shoveling snow on the roof because we were afraid we didn't have enough pitch. And then we were also looking in late September to see if ice was forming on the drinkers for the stop. So I just would ask that you, if you had another thing to say about the clip, in any one of those roles as grandpa farmer, indigenous leader, what would it be?
I grew up on the south side of Shiprock, and we're in a semi-arid desert, at least that part of the community. But when I was growing up, even across the open range, there would be flowers of all color, all sorts, just canvassing the whole range all the way up to the Shiprock. And it's incredible that today there is no such kind of foliage that we see out there. It's just nothing but tumbleweeds. And then also I remember that we would have snows. We would have snows that every year. I remember one snow in 1969 that the football team had to go and dig out people out of their homes. The snow got so large. And we had rains that we could depend on. Every year we had nice, good rain. And today it's just the opposite. We don't see snow, we don't see rain. And it is hot. It's getting hotter and hotter. And it's just been a very drastic, tremendous change from my childhood, just 50 years ago.
Even in a shorter time frame than that.
Yeah.
I remember those going to school in Flagstaff when I first started, and they shut the highway down. We were stuck there for Christmas, and we were helicoptering grain, feed, and hay in for Native American farms and ranches and being stuck there. Chili and I are a lot older than you, David, but I know you have a lot to say about Bill Du Bois and what he said there. He kind of went a little speed bump over fossil fuels, and we're sort of concentrating on that today and climate change. But did anything else in the clip there, the video clip, register with you?
Yeah, I mean, we're the stewards of the land now, and we need to think about our kids. I've got two kids, two boys, and it's kind of putting things into perspective. You know, we need to make the choices now that affects their kids, and we need to demonstrate. We need to make the choices now that we things matter. You know, I think one of the things is getting folks to realize that the connectiveness we have to our environment. You know, we watch TV and we sit in the house, but you know, we gotta feel what's going on outside and walk around. You know, we see drought most places in New Mexico and the Four Corners right now, and so we know what's causing that. You know, that we got to think about our role that we play. And everything that we do impacts our environment. You know, some of it's small, some of it's incremental, some of it's over time, some of it's shorter. And I think that those are some of the things we gotta impress on our next generation is that importance of what we do now makes a difference. And and what we do for their kids, we have to really think about that and not just pass it on to the next generation.
As has been done for so many generations, and here we are now grappling with a worldwide problem, and it comes right home to Chile and the loss of flowers at Shiprock, or up to Natalie and what's happening with the snow pack in the high Rocky Mountains. And so we talk about this fossil fuel part that Bill Du Bois mentioned there relative to climate change. And when we talk about it, we get a little carried away. By we, I mean people that are in it up to their ears, like Natalie and I and many other oil and gas advocates, activists. And we talk about methane, and then we talk about CO2, and then we talk about benzene and toluene, and then we talk about smog and ozone precursors and VOCs. And what I really think we could do, David, is if you would give us under that umbrella, kind of give us the science foundation here. So put us all on the same footing, if you would. Can you take off and talk about that now?
Sure, I'll be glad to. Yeah, so our climate is moderated by the seasons, and so we've got the gases in our atmosphere that moderate it even further. So we've got the greenhouse gases that are out there. That's the natural atmosphere that keeps us nice and toasty, so we're not like a really cold planet. And then so we've, over the years, probably over getting near 150 years or more, we've known about these gases, and then more and more as we go on, we know the role of these trace gases in our atmosphere, and that we're slowly changing the composition of the atmosphere and changing the way it absorbs and releases radiation. That's the solar radiation, and then it releases the long wave radiation, the heat. And so as we tweak the atmosphere more and more, we're slowly tweaking the way the balance of energy in our planet. And we've got actual measurements of the how much energy comes in the Earth and how much leaves to space, and we've been keeping track of this. So it's something that we know quite a bit about now compared to what we knew like in the 70s. And so and we keep track of these gases. We keep track of the concentration of these gases, and that's what a lot of us do. Is we're very concerned about the levels of these greenhouse gases that moderate our temperature of the Earth, and we're slowly tweaking it so that we're changing the climate now. And so and it's we're really seeing the brunt of it, since the 1970s. And when I give a lot of talks, and usually give on average about a talk a week, I usually show the temperature trends over since the 70s or even earlier before then, and we've seen this trend upwards. And I do work in both north and southern hemisphere, and we're seeing the same kind of trends in South America and Asia as well as we're seeing in our backyards in New Mexico. And it's something that's not just local, we're seeing it global. And so, we've got to, face up to the fact that the stuff that we do every day is impacting the climate all over the world. And we're all in this together, but we've got to do the choices that are local choices that make a difference. So we're seeing droughts, getting worse, and not just because it's drier, but the temperatures are climbing up. So our droughts are hotter than they used to be, hotter than the 50s droughts. And even some of my colleagues are even talking about the word mega drought because of the fact that we're not seeing any end to this. And the climate is, our area, especially here in the Southwest, we're already semi-arid, and we were talking about even becoming more arid in the future. Just looking at the impacts to wildfires. If you go to any one of our reservoirs in the Southwest right now, you can really see it. Just use your eyes to see where we are, and a lot of that is due to our changing climate. We've got wet periods and dry periods, but this one is we're seeing it's an extended, and we're seeing that temperature rise. So we're losing a lot of our water vapor because of that rise in temperature. And so we've got a lot of models and people looking at this very intensely all over the world, and we're coming to the same conclusion. It's the greenhouse gases that we're pumping out of combustion, as well as leaking through all various anthropogenic sources. And we're talking about the oil and gas industry, and that's something in our backyard we need to work on. We need to play our part and work on this, because we're all in this together. We got to have regulations that make sense and control what needs to be controlled, and limit what needs to be limited. So I mean, we really need to migrate off of fossil fuels, but right now where we at, we got to do this, keeping the pollution to the minimum. So I think that's our bottom line. And I look at climate data all day, every day of the year, and I'm just seeing it. Rising temperatures, morning lows are getting warmer, the growing season's getting longer. Having to deal with talking about gardening. We have to go a little higher, a little further north. How things migrate, endemic species changing their patterns where they are. So it's something that we're already experiencing already. And so it's if there are anybody here that doesn't think it's us, give me a call and we can chat a little more about it, because I can show you and what I really treasure about it. I like to go fishing and camping, and you can see the impacts of this, and I'll be glad to and guide you and to show you these things.
Yeah. Yep, David, we see that, all of us do. And for those of us talking about the New Mexico Environment Department, the NMED rule that's upcoming, as you just mentioned, we are looking at what we often call the low-hanging fruit. So while we are waiting for renewables and cultural changes that will push us away from fossil fuels, in the meantime, in the short term, this low-hanging fruit of stopping these leaks and vents from methane, oil and gas operations, that is something that we, just to be responsible, we need to insist that gets done now, and we're going to try to help the Environment Department do that. So I want to just say that it's kind of remarkable to have a climatologist like you right there in Las Cruces, and then just over the line, if everyone doesn't know, there's one of the most famous climatologists and communicators in the world, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, there in Lubbock, Texas. And she was on the platform with Barack Obama when he signed the Paris Climate Accord. And she has a wonderful PBS series. If you know skeptics, well, certainly David said, why don't you have that skeptic call me? I picked that up. And then, and we'll have the links posted here as well. But we're going to post a link for Dr. Hayhoe's PBS series, because she does it in a very friendly way. It's not fun exactly, but she makes it as friendly as possible. She's married to an evangelical pastor. She is equipped to talk to people who may have skepticism because of those reasons. And she also has a big section on informing kids. How do you talk to your kids about it? So that's up there on methanemattersnm.org/take action. And she does make it kind of fun. So Dave, thanks for those observations. And I want to go back, Chili, if we can. And you had started telling the history of even in your lifetime, how it has affected your community. And I wanted to say that, I think we've known each other for about 30 years, but even in that period of time, the oil and gas intensity has shifted from the hogback, Hospa areas over towards the Eastern Agency, which is more where I am now. But the lasting effects of oil and gas extraction in the Dene lifestyle, what has happened, how we've lost the flowers, If you could speak more to that, because whether it was in the HOSPA or the hogback, or whether it's now come out further into the counselor area, and there, those effects are still the same. So can you share with us some of your history?
We have different perspectives as individual human beings. And the perspective that I have, which is representative of indigenous peoples, most generally, we have a great commonality in terms of our perceptions, our beliefs, our relationship with the earth, and the cosmic forces, the life energies. So that's the perspective that I view a lot of these issues. With us, it's not a question that the earth is a living entity, that it's a fact that she has spirit. If God is everywhere, then that means that the spirit of the Creator permeates throughout the earth. And that's what gives the earth that spirit, that living essence of life. And in the creation of the earth, for the purpose of a continuity of life, a very delicate balance was put in place, and we can all agree whether we share these perspectives or not. But that balance, that equilibrium that the earth needs in order to perpetuate life the way that it's supposed to be, is very much upset. And the climate chaos certainly is a testament to that fact. The earth is in trouble. That's very clear. And we've been saying this for many, many, many years. And science only in recent years is coming to concur on that conclusion that we have, that the trajectory that the capitalism and the development of energies has us on is going in a direction that is detrimental to the life of the earth, and with that, all life on earth, and within the earth. And we have our indigenous prophecies about how things would be here in these later times, and I can talk about some of those prophecies. But there's one prophecy that I do always reflect on, and that's a modern day prophecy made by a man by the name of Stephen Hawking here in 2006, which is only a few years ago, 15, 16 years ago. And his conclusion was that this planet has only 100 years left. And this is based on his scientific calculations, this trajectory that we are on. All of these scientific calculations, his conclusion is that the life of Earth will come to a demise if we don't do something very drastically to change that trajectory. And in his statement, in his prediction, he says that the cause of the demise of this earth and all life on this earth would be the nuclear threat, would be the climate chaos, and virulent disease. And we are just now coming out of the nightmare of COVID-19. So we understand very clearly what Mr. Hawking was saying. And that's Mr. Hawking's discussion there. It very much aligns with the concern and the great advocacy that we have as indigenous peoples, that we must act now. It's almost too late for us to get off of this trajectory and save the planet for the sake of our children, for our grandchildren, for our generations to come.
Thank you, Chili. I know I've shared much of what Chili is talking about, and I know Natalie, working in the San Juan Basin, you have as well. I want to just say something about growing up in Farmington, which is just near Shiprock, and that we have different perspectives, as Chili has said, but we share a commonality. And now my commonality, I think, is closer, that I don't live in Farmington, I don't work in a desk job, but now I've moved, and my wife and I, to a small ranch, and we have 122 gas wells on our ranch or immediately adjacent to it. And that allows me to make the leap from the science that David has talked about to what Chili is just now talking about. And that is that those toxic chemicals, that what the oil and gas companies will call waste, that they don't care about it. It's their trash, and they throw it out on the doorstep of the Dene. They throw it out on the doorstep of rural Americans throughout the West, and particularly here in the San Juan Basin. And then not only on your doorstep, in your face, as Natalie can talk about when she goes to the field, not just here in the San Juan Basin, not just on our ranch, but throughout the Permian, where it's every bit as bad, if not worse. And that while we may not be talking about indigenous people, we're talking about people who have limited options to move. They are there by fate, or not something that they chose to be polluted. That wasn't their choice. That was forced on them. And so, I can see 10 wells from my porch. And 33 wells within a mile of our house. So, I want to just say, before we get to Natalie's going to talk to us about different form of this science, and I know her personal reaction is as well. But, we learned that Hillcore Energy, which is the largest gas producer in New Mexico, is also the largest producer of waste methane in the U.S., not by some per capita thing, just bigger than Exxon. So and we get this from a report from the Clean Air Task Force. So it's heavy science behind the report. And what Clean Air Task Force wants to do, and Chili, you may be aware of this, but I think it's pretty inspiring as a nonprofit, that what their mission is to push the change in technologies and policies needed to get zero emissions, to get a high energy planet at an affordable cost. And they don't just mean cost in money. Imagine a world where the energy needs of all humans are met efficiently without damaging the atmosphere. And now we know that's true. We can't get there, however, unless we hold these oil and gas companies accountable for their pollution. I'm going to stay in Hillcore for just a minute here. This worst polluter in the country story was picked up by the New York Times just recently. So we're now infamous again, like with the methane hotspot, that here we're home. Most of this pollution of Hillcores is in the San Juan Basin, where Chili lives, where I live, where Natalie has spent so much time. And then it was picked up again just last week by the Santa Fe New Mexican, using the Clean Air Task Force study. So I'm just going to ask Natalie, does it surprise you that Hillcore is the worst methane polluter in the country?
It doesn't. It's I mean, what I've seen is anecdotal in that I haven't gone to all of the tens of thousands of sites of Hillcore, but for the ones I've gone to, which are probably more than 100 in the San Juan Basin, we consistently see a lack of repair, which results in significant emissions. And oftentimes we will file complaints and come back the next quarter or the next year or years later and see the exact same piece of equipment that was emitting back in 2018, 2019, and was emitting again in 2021. So we see this pattern of repeat or possibly ongoing. I wasn't there every day, every of those years in between, but it sure seems like it's quite possible that it's been going on for years.
Well, working with Natalie very closely for these years, I want to kind of bring our focus back. I'm going to throw up our billboard again, Methane Matters, nm.org/take action, because I want to give you a little bit of a pep talk, if I can, about why we are here. We are talking about the methane rule making that's coming up. The environmental department will call that maybe ozone precursors, or they're going to talk about smog. But we're all talking about clean air. Methane and the chemicals that come with it are the subject of all of that. So as this rule was being put together under the governor's direction, back in 2019, there was a methane advisory panel formed by the governor to make this happen. And I was on that panel along with many others. We were unable to get all the wells included. Industry was able to get a great big exception or loophole for what are called stripper wells, which mean low production wells. And as Chile knows, many of the wells in the San Juan Basin are low production. And so that they would have been excluded. In the Permian, there's a number of them as well. And it turned out that was maybe 90% of the wells in the state would be excluded through this loophole, this stripper loophole. And we tried and worked to get the Environment Department to take that exclusion out. And it just was kind of like a stone wall. But organizations like the Environmental Defense Fund, like Natalie's group, Earthworks, like the Clean Air Task Force, all across America came in with their members, with people like you, activists. I'm speaking to our audience now, webinar or podcast. People like you let their voice be heard, even in the rule development process. And I'm going to tell you the last proposed NMED rule, I met with many others, with Secretary Kinney, and he brought that last rule forward, and they took out the loophole. They took out the exemption for these stripper wells and these low production wells. So that's a huge victory and a big success. And that's due to citizen activism, because believe me, the oil companies were fighting that all the way. And I want you to take heart and have confidence that you can do this, that we'll defend the good parts of this rule, and then we'll get together and work on the parts that need to be improved. So, Natalie, are you ready to show us some of the magic where you make the invisible visible?
I am ready, yes.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Don, for the pep talk and for teeing this up. What I'd like to do today is share with you really a snapshot that is a drop in the bucket of our findings and of what's really out there. But I think it's a way of telling the story, and for me at least, the visual. It's hard for me to find the words to describe what we find sometimes, and so the visuals I find very helpful. And I mean, I think the big headline and cutting to the chase, and I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it again. This oil and gas pollution and harm is everywhere, every day, all the time. And so, as you said, to have that stripper well exception, which was a huge number of the wells in New Mexico, just was mind-boggling. I think they're kind of three. We'll start going through some of the visuals before we get into them. I think they're just kind of three takeaways I'd really love to share today. I mean, the first is this improved rule that we have now that is so different than what we had last fall from NMED would not have been possible without the voices of frontline communities showing up for so many different consultations, not just specific to this rule, but for the last several years over the course of these methane discussions. It has changed the dynamic and I think the vision of the agencies within New Mexico, and that is looking and thinking communities. And two of the big pieces that are improved are, one is this removal of the exception so that so many more sites will be part of this rule, subject to this rule, subject to additional inspections, subject to reporting more of their numbers. It's just more information, more accountability, more details, which were frankly not accessible to the public without this proposed draft rule. And then the other really key piece that we'll also talk about in this presentation is that NMED is looking to and considering input from the public about oil and gas as credible evidence to be considered for possible enforcement actions. And I'm just pausing there because it is so huge. And so I'm planting these seeds and we'll talk about it as we go, but just the possibility and the opportunity for community and public voice in New Mexico is greater than it's ever been. And here we are at this moment on the sort of precipice of this much strengthened rule. And so it's, while I will share a lot of gloom and doom with my images, it is a moment for some change and a turning point, I would say a pivot point for New Mexico. Okay, so Earthworks does something really unique in how we do our work. So in response to community concerns, we take this optical gas imaging instrument. We call it a camera for shorthand, or OGI camera. But this is a state-of-the-art lens and camera that we take into the oil and gas field to document what we're seeing from these sites and to capture otherwise invisible pollution and emissions coming from these sites. This is a gas-seeking instrument. So I'm a certified thermographer. Several of us with Earthworks are certified thermographers. We go through the same training. We sit side by side, or we might be on Zoom calls to get our certification to be thermographers. These are cameras that are meant to film methane and volatile organic compounds. And as we know, volatile organic compounds include carcinogens or are cancer causing. So this is a great example just to see kind of a now you see it, now you don't kind of a thing. So we're looking at a site, and there's sort of that red arrow is pointing at an unlit flare. And so with the naked eye, we might not know that there's anything amiss there, especially depending on the wind. We might not have any odors or anything. And then when we turn the camera to it, it's really clear that it's an unlit flare. So that's a flare that is failing to combust the emissions, and instead it's an open vent. So, in honor of Dawn, I thought we would start at Dawn's ranch, Devil Spring Ranch. So we're in the San Juan Basin. This is in Rio Arriba County. Just a few photos of its beauty and some of the signs around. And so as Dawn said, there are, I think, about 36 sites within a mile of Dawn's ranch, and more than 100 sites on the whole ranch together. So that first, what we're looking at here are emissions we captured back in March. And another site here. So a lot of these are valve boxes. Often when we approach this site, we're smelling odors. Then when we turn the camera to it, we can see exactly what that source is. And then we're going back. So that's first slide we saw. Now we're seeing it again. And this is just from a few weeks ago in the end of May. Exact same site, exact same emission source, significant odors. We submitted a complaint and nothing has changed. So these are what appear to be ongoing emissions. There were many other sites. I think of the 16 sites that I filmed on the 28th of May, 12 of them had emissions and or odors. And then for this last one, and so at this point, I'm really trying to go home to Colorado. and I'm on the highway. I'm on 64, and I see this site that looks really run down, and the tanks look like they're corroded, and I'm about to just let it go. And as I drive by, there's a massive amount of emissions that are coming into the car with the windows rolled up. So I'm getting totally exposed by the site that I just drove by. So I turn around and I take a look at it, and sure enough, you see what we see here, which are, these are, I believe they are produced water tanks with really significant emissions, so much so that I smelled them a quarter mile away with my window rolled up driving back. So this is hill core to these are good examples of what we see from hill core sites and the consistency of the ongoing emissions. And again, that was 4 sites out of the tens of thousands that we know to be still operating in the area. Okay, so now we're going to come down to the Chaco Canyon region. Just some pictures of just how special and beautiful this place is, and we'll share some examples of emissions. So here's a site. This was from March of this year. We found similar emissions in November of 2020. And all of these are enduring, I think almost all of these are enduring resources sites. And what we're seeing are these massive vents, venting of emissions coming off these tank batteries. And again in November and then in March, we saw the exact same kind of emissions coming off these tanks. We could smell them from a distance, and they seemed really consistent and had been going on for some time. Some of them I went back to a couple times during the week to see that they were still emitting. Okay, so I'm going to take a little pause on this parade of harm and what we see in the field to just talk a little bit about the significant action that NMED took starting in the end of 2019 and what that was captured and is part of the draft rule that just came out in May. So starting in 2019, NMED started to take action on the videos that Earthworks took, often in response to community concerns, and they issued letters of potential violation. The first 4 were in the Chaco area. And so NMED wrote a letter to the operators sharing our evidence, our optical gas imaging video, and said, you have 14 days. Looks like you have, you may be out of compliance with your permit. You have 14 days to demonstrate and prove that you are in compliance, or we're going to pursue enforcement actions. What's so significant about this is that it shifted the burden onto the operator to prove compliance, as opposed to leaving the burden on community members to prove that there's been a harm, and that harm is that the harm that has been suffered is significant enough for some kind of action by the regulatory agency. This shifting of the burden is really significant, and there's language both for third-party credible evidence as well as credible evidence from the public is part of the NMED rule, meaning that NMED wants to hear from frontline community members and other community members about what they're seeing or they're smelling or they're experiencing as a result of oil and gas in their area.
It was like a revelation for me when the NAS colleague Sharon Wilson brought that close camera to our ranch long, long ago. And that's a life-changing experience because your naked eye just says, hey, it doesn't look can't be that bad. And then click that lens of truth open and see it. So
in conclusion, I mean, what I learn when I'm out in the field, probably I relearn each time I'm out, is just that I'm struck by the disconnect between what I see and what I smell and what I hear about from frontline community members, and this I think false narrative of this controlled, clean industry that we hear from the industry and from those who support it, and the sort of ground truthing and the reality check that we see from the camera, that we hear from what it is to live near these sites, is not a clean and controlled industry. This is a harmful, largely out of control industry. This NMED rule paired with the OCD rule starts to rein in some of what I would say has been kind of a wild, wild west approach to oil and gas for quite some time. And just a point that I don't think I shared before, we're talking about 57,000 active sites in New Mexico. The actual enforcement force, the capacity of boots on the ground in New Mexico is less than 24. The Oil and Gas Division has maybe a dozen inspectors. The number goes up and down. And last I heard, NMED had about 7 oil and gas air inspectors, non-certified to use the camera that we use. So they're relying on their sight and smell and what they can smell, what they can hear when they're conducting inspections. Which, if that's all I relied on, I would miss quite a lot, because there's a lot of things that I can't detect until I look at it with the camera. So I think I'm encouraged that some of the main concerns and some of those massive loopholes that Don referred to have been significantly closed in this new draft rule. And I'm still looking to see what what comes next, and how the significant progress that this rule brings can actually be enforced and maintained in a way that's the spirit of the rule to begin with, knowing that enforcement capacity is not where anyone wants it to be. We've been advocating to support these agencies more so they could do the job they'd like to be doing, but the reality is that's not there. And the reality is the number of inspections that we've conducted as Earthworks in New Mexico is far greater than what the state has done.
But Chili, how would you relate what Natalie has shown us in these images, what she said, to your story?
I think about my relatives who live in further east in the methane cloud. They talk about their headaches and their respiratory issues, and you don't see why that they have those ailments. But with this evidence that we're being shown, clearly shows the causes for those for the headaches that our family members are having out there. And I think that one point also that we need to really stress is that the fumes, the toxicity of this gases elements certainly is contributing to the asthma, the respiratory problems that our people are having, particularly with children. And it's just maddening to know that the oil and gas people don't seem to care that this is the consequences, the collateral damage that they're causing, not only to human people, but the environment, to the earth. And it's all for the sake of the bottom line at the bank. And the polluters in this case, and then they're complicit politicians and bureaucrats. They need to be held accountable. And the one message that I put to them, to the people, the policymakers who have the opportunity, the responsibility to make the changes that need to be made, the message that I have to them is that they need to understand that the dastardly work that they're doing here in destroying the environment is absolutely causing the early demise of the earth and all life. And Mr. Banker, Mr. Politician, Mr. Bureaucrat, and you, the oil and gas developer, your own grandchildren will not escape this dilemma that you have created. The bottom line at your bank will not rescue them. You are damaging the future of your own grandchildren. And I have to say that in future times, what will our grandchildren say about us? I know that my grandchildren will speak kindly of me, because they will know that I did what I had to do, what I felt I had to do to protect their earth, to protect their planet. And Mr. Oil Developer, all I can ask is, what will your grandchildren say about you?
Thank you, Chili. Um, that's why we are here. The reason we are here today is because our planet is in trouble, and that we're at this important, critical moment in New Mexico's decision how we will react. And thank you all so much for bringing your knowledge and your spirit and your science to our discussion today. We're going to have to wrap up, and I'm ready to go another hour. But let me do this. Let me put my rancher hat on. Let me put my grandpa hat on and say something to Chili as a grandpa. That thank you for saying that, and how will our children look at us and our grandchildren remember us. And Natalie, I want to tell a personal story about you and me, and this is a story for everybody in the front lines, but David was talking, if I can pull David in here, he was talking about, if you smell it, but you can't see it, and we don't exactly know what it means. And so Natalie and I, driving around now for so long, so many times on our ranch, Chili, you know what the landscape is like, and we're driving through these well locations, and maybe it's summer and you have your windows down, and you're driving, talking, and here comes that hydrocarbon smell. So it's a kind of a mixture of raw gasoline, and you're right, your nose can't discriminate whether that's toluene or benzene or just raw gasoline or what it is. And you're faced with this dilemma. And Chili, I'm speaking to you because many times, if Natalie's not there, my grandchildren are in the car. I'm trying to show them nature of the ranch or have them work and be part of our world. And we hit that thing driving, 15 miles an hour or so, hit that well location. Here comes this smell. And your decision is, and Natalie and I have been here many times, do you hold your breath right then and try to make it to the other side of the well location, or do you roll up the windows real fast and try to breathe? And kind of what always happens is you decide to hold your breath, then you don't make it to the other side of the well location. You wind up taking a big gasp of hydrocarbon odor as well. And when it's your grandchildren, they're there. You just are. What are we doing, and what is being forced on them? So look, thank you all so much for coming today. I want to just wrap up with a few things for everyone to remember. Like I said, this is why we are here today. So we're going to wrap up and remember this, that everyone listening to the podcast, everyone watching the webinar can be part of this just as much as David and Natalie and I are. You can be part of this. Go to your methanemattersnm.org/take action. Get in there and remember this, that we do have an excellent proposed NMED rule. That's been done. And we're thanking the governor and right now the Secretary of the Environment for getting this in motion. It is a strong rule. It is a significant improvement, historic actually in New Mexico. And then we need to build on that. We need to defend the good parts of that rule. There are important areas that can be improved, and we want you to advocate for that. So for the health of our families, our future, our New Mexico, here at Clearing the Air, we want to have you come back. And now we'll leave you with a bookend video clip from Bill DuBois, where we saw at the start, and what he's going to say. Let's listen to him say that it's so important that we not just hope, but that we take action and work to change our climate for the better.
People ask me fairly often whether I am hopeful, and I give that question a lot of thought, but in the end I think it's the wrong question. The question should not be, are you hopeful? The question should be, what are you going to do next? What is your plan? How are you going to help? Everybody needs to put their shoulder to the problem and push as hard as they can.
So thank you everyone for joining, for watching, for listening. Don't forget our second episode coming up at the end of July. And we're going to